If you've been spending hundreds on hair care, but your scalp still feels tight, itchy, or your hair just won't cooperate, there's a good chance you've been treating the symptom instead of the source. I'm Dr. Elena Voss, and today we're breaking down the science behind skinification of hair, the approach that's finally bringing real dermatological rigor to the way we think about scalp health. You're listening to Luxury Beauty on a Budget podcast. Quick heads up before we dive in. Everything you're about to hear, the research, the data, the script, that's all human verified and written by real experts. The voice delivering it, though? That's AI generated. Just wanted to be upfront about that. Now, if you've been listening for a while, thank you. Your time matters, and I don't take it for granted. If you're new here, welcome. You're in the right place if you want beauty science without the BS. We drop new episodes every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And today, we're talking about skinification of hair and why dermatologists are finally taking scalp health as seriously as facial skin. Let's go. The skinification of hair represents the most significant formulation shift in hair care chemistry since the introduction of silicone alternatives. This movement applies dermatological active ingredients, peptides, retinoids, niacinamide, hyaluronic acid, to scalp health with the same precision we've applied to facial skin for decades. If you're familiar with bioregenerative skincare principles, you already understand the molecular logic. The scalp is skin, and skin responds to biochemically targeted interventions. What's changed in 2026 is the formulation sophistication and the price accessibility of these scalp-focused actives. So let's start with the fundamentals. What exactly is skinification of hair? Skinification of hair is the cosmetic chemistry principle of treating the scalp as an extension of facial skincare, applying the same evidence-based active ingredients and formulation strategies used in dermatological products. Rather than focusing exclusively on hair shaft cosmetics, shine, slip, temporary smoothing, this approach prioritizes scalp barrier function, pH optimization, cellular turnover, and follicular health. The term emerged around 2021, but reached critical mass in formulation labs by 2024, when ingredient suppliers began offering scalp-optimized versions of proven facial actives. By 2026, we're seeing encapsulated retinol formulated specifically for scalp penetration without irritation, low molecular weight hyaluronic acid at clinically relevant percentages, 0.5 to 2%, and copper peptide complexes designed to reach the dermal papilla without being deactivated by sebum. This isn't repackaging facial serums for hair. Proper skinification formulations account for the scalp's unique environment, higher sebum production, denser follicular structures, occlusion from hair shafts, and a microbiome distinct from facial skin. The pH range differs. Scalp optimal sits at 4.5 to 5.5 versus facial at 5.0 to 6.0. Lipid composition varies, and penetration pathways require different molecular weights and delivery systems. The commercial appeal is obvious. Crossover consumers who already understand vitamin C stabilization or peptide synergies in their facial routines now expect the same rigor from shampoo. But the biological reality is what makes this work. Follicular health directly correlates with barrier integrity, inflammation control, and cellular signaling, all targets addressable through topical actives we've studied extensively in dermatology for 40 years. Now, let's talk about how skinification of hair actually works. The mechanism of skinification relies on three interconnected biological systems: the scalp barrier, that's your stratum corneum and acid mantle; the follicular microenvironment, which includes sebaceous glands, dermal papilla, and hair matrix; and the inflammatory cascade that links barrier dysfunction to hair thinning, sensitivity, and accelerated aging. First up, scalp barrier optimization. The scalp's stratum corneum functions identically to facial skin. You've got corneocytes bound by lipid lamellae, ceramides, cholesterol, free fatty acids in a 1:1:1 molar ratio. When this barrier is compromised, whether through aggressive surfactants, pH disruption, or environmental stressors, transepidermal water loss increases, inflammatory cytokines activate, and follicular cycling can be disrupted. Skinification addresses this with barrier-identical lipids, ceramide-dominant formulations, typically ceramide NP, AP, and EOP, cholesterol and fatty acids in physiological ratios, budget options like the ordinary multi-peptide scalp serum, around $19 for 60 milliliters, manufactured in Canada, include 2% ceramide complex alongside hematin at 0.1% for anti-inflammatory support. Luxury comparisons like Kerastase Genesis Defense Thermique, around $40 for 150 milliliters, offers similar ceramide profiles at 27 cents per milliliter versus 32 cents per milliliter. The price premium buys fragrance chemistry and retail markup, not superior barrier repair. Next, active ingredient penetration and follicular targeting. Unlike facial skin, scalp topicals must navigate sebum occlusion and hair density. This requires optimized molecular weights and delivery vehicles. Hyaluronic acid in skinification formulas typically uses 50 to 150 kilodalton fragments versus 800 to 2,000 kilodaltons in many facial serums to penetrate the follicular ostium. Niacinamide hair serums work at 3 to 5% concentrations, identical to facial applications, but in lighter bases like water, glycerin, or propanediol systems to avoid buildup. Retinoid formulations require even more precision. Scalp-appropriate retinol concentrations sit at 0.01 to 0.05%, compared to 0.1 to 1% facial, often encapsulated in phospholipid liposomes or cyclodextrin complexes, to minimize irritation while maintaining follicular penetration. The goal isn't epidermal exfoliation, which can trigger reactive shedding, but modulation of keratinocyte proliferation in the hair matrix and anti-inflammatory effects via RAR gamma receptor activation. Retinol scalp treatments manufactured by brands like the Inky List, around $16 for 50 milliliters, or Act Plus Acre, around $68 for 50 milliliters and U.S. manufactured, use time-release technologies that previously cost $150 or more in prescription compounds. And here's where things get really interesting: peptide signaling and cellular communication. This is where skinification moves beyond simple barrier repair. Peptides function as cell signaling molecules, influencing fibroblast activity, collagen XVI production in the follicular papilla, keratinocyte differentiation, and growth factor expression. Peptides in hair care require molecular weights under 500 daltons for effective scalp penetration. Larger chains sit on the surface or require penetration enhancers that risk irritation. Copper peptide GHK-Cu, molecular weight 340 daltons, is particularly well studied for follicular health. At 0.05 to 0.2% concentrations, it demonstrates anti-inflammatory, antioxidant, and extracellular matrix remodeling effects via upregulation of decorin and glycosaminoglycans in the dermal papilla. Budget formulations like Revolution Haircare Thinning Hair Scalp Serum, around $10 for 100 milliliters, UK manufactured, include 0.1% copper tripeptide 1 alongside 5% caffeine, a combination that mirrors $85 luxury alternatives at 1/8 the price. The biological reality here: peptides work through cumulative signaling, not single application miracles. Consistent application over 8 to 12 weeks shows measurable effects on hair density, anagen to telogen ratio shifts, and caliber, with medullary diameter increases of 5 to 8% in clinical trials. But they're not growth stimulants. They're follicular environment optimizers, which means results plateau without addressing nutritional deficits, hormonal factors, or genetic miniaturization patterns. So, why does skinification of hair matter? Scalp health is the foundation for every other hair goal: growth, retention, manageability, cosmetic appearance. You can't lipid smooth a damaged cuticle into sustained health if the follicle emerging from a disrupted, inflamed scalp barrier is already compromised at the matrix level. Traditional hair care focused downstream: coat the shaft, temporarily seal damage, add visual shine. Skinification works upstream: optimize the environment where hair is generated. This matters clinically because follicular miniaturization, that's androgenetic alopecia, telogen effusion triggers, and inflammatory scalp conditions like seborrheic dermatitis or folliculitis all respond to the same barrier-supportive anti-inflammatory interventions we use on facial skin. From a practical standpoint, skinification simplifies routine building. If you already understand how to layer scalp actives using the same pH and molecular weight logic as facial skincare, you're applying transferable knowledge rather than learning an entirely separate category. Vitamin C on the scalp, magnesium ascorbyl phosphate at 5 to 10%, functions identically to facial applications: antioxidant protection, tyrosinase inhibition, which is relevant for hyperpigmented scalps, and collagen synthesis support in the follicular dermal sheath. The budget accessibility in 2026 is what makes this genuinely democratizing. 5 years ago, scalp-targeted peptides and encapsulated retinoids lived exclusively in $150-plus professional treatments. Today, brands like The Ordinary, Revolution, The Inky List, and Good Molecules manufacture these formulations at $8 to $25 price points with ingredient transparency that allows direct comparison to luxury competitors. You're paying for actives and delivery systems, not brand storytelling. The friction point: application consistency. Facial skincare benefits from muscle memory: twice daily, visible skin, easy access. Scalp treatments require parting hair, section application, and the patience to let lightweight serums absorb rather than immediately styling. This isn't a flaw in the science. It's a usability reality that requires honest communication. If you won't commit to 3 to 5 minutes of scalp application 4 to 5 nights weekly, even the most elegant copper peptide formula won't deliver results. Moving on to the types and variations of skinification approaches. Skinification formulations fall into 4 primary categories, each targeting different biological mechanisms. Understanding these distinctions prevents redundant layering and allows strategic combination based on your specific scalp concerns. First, barrier repair formulations. These prioritize lipid replenishment and pH optimization. Core ingredients include ceramide complexes at 1 to 5%, cholesterol at 0.5 to 2%, squalene or jojoba oil at 5 to 15%, and pH buffers maintaining the 4.5 to 5.5 range. Budget standout: Revolution Haircare Scalp Soothing Serum, around $9 for 100 milliliters, delivers 3% ceramide blend with bisobolol at 9 cents per milliliter. Luxury comparison: Olaplex Scalp and Hair Oil No. 0 Intensive Bond Building Treatment, around $30 for 50 milliliters and U.S. manufactured at 60 cents per milliliter, includes squalene and hemisqualene, but no ceramide complex. It's primarily a penetration enhancer for their bond building system, not a barrier repair formula. Second, active exfoliation and cell turnover. We're talking retinoids, AHAs, and PHAs that modulate keratinocyte proliferation without stripping barrier function. encapsulated retinol at 0.01 to 0.05%, mandelic acid at 3 to 5%, or glucolactone at 5 to 8% at scalp-appropriate percentages. The Inky List caffeine-stimulating scalp treatment, around $16 for 50 milliliters, combines 0.025% retinol, time release, with 1% caffeine and 0.5% betaine salicylate. That's 3 distinct mechanisms: cell signaling, vasodilation, and lipophilic exfoliation in one 32-cent per milliliter formula. Third, peptide and growth factor complexes. These target follicular signaling and dermal papilla support. Copper peptides at 0.05 to 0.2%, biomimetic peptides like the matrixyl types, palmityl tripeptide 1, palmityl tripeptide 7, or plant stem cell extracts, typically 1 to 3% of apple or edelweiss cultures. The ordinary multipeptide serum for hair density, around $19 for 60 millimeters and Canada manufactured, includes Procapil, that's biotinyl GHK apigenin oleanolic acid complex at 3%, Capixyl, a biomimetic peptide with red clover extract at 4%, and caffeine at 1%, all at 32 cents per milliliter. That's comparable ingredient density to $75 alternatives. Fourth, anti-inflammatory and antioxidant systems. These interrupt inflammatory cascades that link barrier dysfunction to follicular disruption. Niacinamide at 3 to 5%, green tea EGCG at 1 to 2%, bisabolol at 0.5%, or panthenol at 2 to 5%. These often layer with other categories. Niacinamide particularly enhances ceramide synthesis and supports barrier lipid organization. Budget formulations from Good Molecules, Revolution, or Versed consistently deliver 3 to 5% niacinamide at 10 to 20 cents per milliliter price points, whereas prestige brands charge 50 cents to $1 per milliliter for identical concentrations. The strategic variation is combining categories based on scalp assessment. Oily, congestion-prone scalps benefit from active exfoliation plus anti-inflammatory. Dry, sensitive, or chemically treated scalps need barrier repair plus antioxidant. Thinning or aging scalps respond to peptide complexes plus retinoids. Let's tackle the most common questions people have about skinification of hair. Is skinification of hair just a marketing trend, or is there real science behind it? The skinification of hair is grounded in established dermatological science. The scalp is anatomically and biochemically skin with the same barrier structure: lipid lamellae, corneocytes, acid mantle, and response mechanisms, inflammatory cytokines, cell signaling, barrier repair pathways, as facial skin. Clinical research on retinoids, niacinamide, peptides, and ceramides has decades of peer-reviewed data demonstrating efficacy on scalp tissue, not just facial applications. What's new in 2026 is the formulation optimization, delivery systems, molecular weights, pH buffering, specific to scalp environment, and the commercial accessibility of these actives at budget price points. The marketing proliferation is real, but the underlying biochemistry predates the trend by 40 years. Can I just use my facial serums on my scalp instead of buying separate products? You can apply certain facial actives to the scalp: vitamin C serums, niacinamide, some peptide formulations, but optimal results require scalp-specific pH ranges, molecular weights, and base formulations. Facial serums often use heavier emollients like dimethicone, shea butter, occlusive oils that create buildup around follicular ostia, and their pH targets, 5.0 to 6.0, sit slightly higher than scalp optimal 4.5 to 5.5. Retinol concentrations safe for facial skin, 0.1 to 1%, frequently irritate the scalp without encapsulation or time release systems. Hyaluronic acid molecular weights in facial products, 800 to 2,000 kilodaltons, penetrate poorly through sebum-rich scalp tissue compared to 50 to 150 kilodalton fragments in dedicated scalp formulas. For barrier repair ingredients like ceramides, facial products often work adequately, but you'll achieve better penetration and less hair-coating residue with lighter scalp-designed bases like water, glycerin, or propanediol systems, rather than cream emulsions. How long does it take to see results from skinification hair care products? Barrier repair effects, reduced sensitivity, less flaking, improved moisture retention, typically manifest within 2 to 3 weeks of consistent application as lipid lamellae reorganize and transepidermal water loss decreases. Anti-inflammatory benefits from niacinamide or bisabolol can show improvement in redness and itching within 7 to 14 days. Peptide-driven follicular changes, increased hair density, caliber improvements, require 8 to 12 weeks minimum because you're influencing the anagen phase of the hair growth cycle. New growth must emerge from the optimized follicular environment to become visible. Retinoid effects on cell turnover and sebum regulation sit in the middle, 4 to 6 weeks for measurable impact. The biological reality is that scalp tissue remodeling follows the same timeline as facial skincare: incremental, cumulative, and dependent on consistent application frequency. If you're not seeing any change by week 12, reassess active concentrations, application technique, or whether other factors like nutritional deficits, hormonal disruption, or genetic miniaturization require intervention beyond topical actives. Do expensive skinification products work better than budget alternatives? Active ingredient concentration and delivery system determine efficacy, not price point. In 2026, budget brands like The Ordinary, Revolution, The Inky List, and Good Molecules manufacture encapsulated retinol, copper peptides, and ceramide complexes using the same raw ingredient suppliers, BASF, Sederma, Lucas Meyer, as luxury competitors. When you compare formulations side by side, 3% niacinamide, 0.1% copper tripeptide 1, or 2% ceramide blend, the molecular structures are identical regardless of whether the product costs $12 or $85. What you pay for in prestige formulations is fragrance engineering, packaging design, retail markup, and brand positioning, not superior biochemical performance. The exceptions are proprietary peptide complexes like Procapil or Capixil that require licensing fees, but these now appear in sub-$20 products. Quality control and stability testing matter more than brand prestige, but many budget manufacturers produce in FDA-inspected facilities in Canada, the UK, or South Korea with quality standards equivalent to luxury brands. Check for transparent ingredient listings, appropriate preservative systems like phenoxyethanol or ethylhexylglycerin, and pH disclosure when available. Can skinification hair care cause hair loss or scalp irritation if used incorrectly? Yes, misapplied actives can trigger reactive shedding, contact dermatitis, or barrier disruption. The same risks present in facial skincare apply to scalp tissue. Excessive retinoid concentrations above 0.05% without proper introduction can cause desquamation-driven telogen effluvium, where accelerated cell turnover pushes follicles prematurely into the shedding phase. Aggressive exfoliation, multiple acids, high percentage AHAs, or daily mechanical scrubs strips protective sebum and damages the lipid barrier, increasing inflammation and potentially worsening follicular miniaturization. Peptides and niacinamide carry minimal irritation risk at standard concentrations, but layering too many actives without understanding pH compatibility or penetration pathways creates redundancy or deactivation. The application errors to avoid: using actives on broken or inflamed scalp, wait until barrier integrity improves, skipping patch testing when introducing retinoids or strong acids, applying products immediately before heat styling, which drives penetration too aggressively, and neglecting barrier repair support when using exfoliating actives. Let's bring this all together. The skinification of hair translates 40 years of dermatological research into follicular health optimization. By treating the scalp as the biochemically complex skin tissue it is, applying barrier-identical lipids, clinically studied actives, and pH-optimized delivery systems, you address hair quality at the generative source rather than applying cosmetic band-aids to damaged shafts. The 2026 formulation landscape delivers sophisticated peptide complexes, encapsulated retinoids, and multi-weight hyaluronic acids at $8 to $25 price points that were inaccessible outside $150 plus professional treatments 5 years ago. Budget brands manufacture using identical active ingredients, similar concentrations, and comparable delivery technologies to luxury competitors. What separates a $19 copper peptide serum from an $85 version is rarely biochemical performance. It's packaging, fragrance chemistry, and retail markup. The clinical verdict? Skinification works when you apply the same evidence-based rigor to scalp products as facial skincare. Check concentrations, understand molecular weights, verify pH appropriateness, and commit to consistent application. The follicular environment responds to cumulative biochemical signaling, not marketing claims. That wraps up this episode of Luxury Beauty on a Budget podcast. Thanks for spending your time here. Whether you were commuting, working out, or folding laundry, I appreciate you letting me be in your ears. New episodes come out every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. If you found this helpful, I'd really love it if you could leave a 5-star rating and a quick review. I know everyone asks for that, but it genuinely makes a difference. It's how other people who care about science-backed beauty actually find the show. And make sure you're subscribed or following so you get the notification the second a new episode drops. I'll see you next time.